Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, your host of Gnarly Data Waves, presented to you by Dremio. And today on episode 51, we'll be talking about Scania's journey in navigating and implementing a data mesh. But first, a few quick announcements before we get started. And of course, I always like to introduce you to the Dremio Lakehouse platform. Again, bringing you all sorts of great value in helping you implement the data lakehouse, whether it's unified analytics, connecting your data across data lakes, data warehouses, and databases, an SQL query engine that can federate queries across all those sources, and lakehouse management features to make basically implementing a data lakehouse and using a data lakehouse as easy as a data warehouse. And if you want to get hands-on, I highly recommend doing this exercise using this QR code that's right here on the left. We'll also make sure to include a link to that in the show notes when this is posted on YouTube later on. But with that, let's get started with today's adventure, episode 51, Scania's journey in navigating and implementing data mesh. We're going to be joined with August Johnson, strategy manager at Scania, Paolo Platter, CTO, co-founder over there at Witboost, and Nick Atchison, field CDO here at Dremio. But with no further ado, guys, the stage is yours.
All right, let's actually do some quick intros before we get into August's slide. August, do you want to start, and then Paolo, and then I think I'll be mine. Mine will be very quick because I think most of the folks know me here at Dremio.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nick. My name is August Johnson. I'm the strategy manager for Scania for the data mesh journey. So what I help do is to help set the strategy and direction for the initiative alongside interacting with our internal stakeholders and marketing sort of our idea and vision overall.
Awesome. Paolo?
I'm Paolo Platter, CTO and co-founder of Agile Lab, and since 3 years working on Witboost, our data experience platform, and we support Scania in this data mesh journey.
Awesome. And I think many of you know me, so my fast introduction is I'm the field CDO here over at Dremio. But the cool part of my job is I spend about half of every single week normally on the road with our actual customers or prospects, making these things a reality. So actually helping them design a maturity path, because that's where most of my career has been, on your side of the table. So August, happy to share some of my own bruises and lessons learned, and talk about where you're at in your journey as well. But without further ado, I think you're the rock star here for the first half of the show. So if you want to share kind of your experience, your journey, we're here to learn from you first, and then we'll move into more of a fireside chat.
Thanks so much. Then I'll proceed to share my screen. Here we go. So I hope everyone can see the screen.
Yep, we got it.
Great, awesome. So I thought I'd spend these initial couple of minutes to talk quite a bit about data mesh and sort of why we decided to opt for this journey at Scania. So one of the key things that made us go into this journey is that we, alongside probably many others, saw an increase in demand for qualitative and available analytical data. And in conjunction with all of this, we also had Scania's cloud journey going on at the same time, where as a result of Scania's decentralized nature, we saw different parts of the company move to different cloud providers based on their needs and what works for them. So with this increasing demand and change, we had to find some sort of way in making it as easy as possible for analytics teams to be able to find, understand, and get a hold of the data they need to do their job. And in doing this, also embracing these data producing domains to take ownership of their data in an ease of compliance manner. So what were the key decisions that we made in our journey? Well, the first one, and arguably the most important part, was to opt for a so-called tech-agnostic marketplace with a highly customizable governance engine, with the latter being absolutely key, in my opinion, as it allowed us to create tailor-made policies that interact with the vast array of information security tools that we have at Scania. And by having that, it helps decouple our dependency on specific providers, enabling data mesh to be maintained and respond to changes and trends that occur over time. Now, the second part that we made sure to do early on in our journey was to identify a set of key domains based on potential impact, considering their consumer base and their maturity levels. And this was actually something that was proven to be both for the better and for the worse at times, as we did have quite a few really insightful workshops together regarding both in terms of alignment on principles and data product development. However, one key thing that we learned here was also the importance of, especially when you're early in your journey, to balance sort of the development speed you have and what you're projecting with the promises that are made and the discussions that are done with these domains. As otherwise, it's easy if these promises aren't delivered, things might get forgotten with time. But it's also something that has helped us greatly and really helped out with the adoption now that we've become more mature. Now, the third thing that was key for us, and that was to standardize on certain global patterns while respecting domain autonomy. Because keep in mind that these different domains are on different cloud platforms, and we want to embrace them to continue to do what they're good at. But by setting certain standards, such as the adoption of Iceberg, or in some cases Delta, joined by a unified access layer, which in Scania's case is Dremio, we would enable these different cloud platforms to coexist while also having minimum friction for the domains to get on board. And then in our journey as well, we made sure to collaborate with other initiatives as well, with the goal of supporting each other. And a great example of this is our tight collaboration we have with the Cloud Lake Squad. Now, for some listeners, you might think, yeah, a data lake is sort of an anti-pattern to data mesh, and we're absolutely aware of that. However, the way we approached things was essentially that basically the outcome of this collaboration has been that now all Cloud Lake sources that reside in AWS are automatically available in Dremio with, all the privileges and accesses inherited. And what was absolutely key with this is that all these different sources that are in the Cloud Lake have respective information owners in the business. And what we did was to reach out to these different owners, and we're currently doing that, and saying, hey, so you now have your raw data in Dremio. You have a couple of, a range of consumers accessing and working with it. Let's look into how we can build a data product out of this. We have this cool self-serve platform known as Witboost, and we can make things discoverable, and you can get your data contracts in there, and so on and so forth. So that is sort of how we have been approaching that side of collaboration. In addition, we've also been collaborating with the upcoming data catalog team and the data quality tool. And sort of what this also helps with is that you get the word out on multiple fronts at once. And this is something that has helped out quite a bit in our journey. So as I sort of mentioned before, Scania is decentralized. We have many parts of business that have already taken ownership, different maturity levels. Some are very mature, and they're on a tech stack, that suits their needs and their expertise. And of course, we want to embrace this, but we also want to make sure that the data that in turn will turn into data products are discoverable and compliant, powered by Witboost, of course, but also accessible in a unified way through Dremio. So some of the things we did at the start of our journey was to be very proactive in how we marketed data mesh as a whole. And of course, having an established platform team that works with both the development, but also quite a bit on the promotion side, acting as a center of enablement. But one thing that I'd like to highlight in this is and sort of a learning from our journey, is to take careful consideration into sort of how you position data mesh when you're describing and presenting it. Because quite a few times when we have interacted with domains, it has sort of turned into a perception of, platform dilution, if you will, in which they go and say, hey, but we already have, we're on cloud provider X and we've heard about this and that. So why are, why are you introducing two other platforms that, kind of do the same thing? And if you sort of don't position things, in a good way, it tends to, you tend to lose the socio part of data mesh in it, and it becomes, a discussion around technologies. I saw Nick nodding there as well. Maybe that was something you can sympathize with.
I have this conversation every single week, right? And I
Okay.
think, and as you're kind of highlighting too, is the patterns become super important. And if I can actually even pull on your thread a little bit, you mentioned the tech collaboration and synergies, but the other side that you're alluding to now is on the business side. Maybe if you can speak a little bit of that to that part, because I know in my own history, I've had business users go, I don't care if it's data mesh, I don't care if it's centralized, non-centralized, how are you going to help me?
Yes,
So I'm curious
exactly.
about how you did that on the marketing side.
Yes, and that's a very key thing, and is actually a point that I have later on in the presentation, and that is to base things on, the direct impact that it would give to the business. So an example of this is a domain we're collaborating with right now that reached out to us. And they basically said, hey, we're on cloud provider X. We have a ton of consumers on different Scania markets. They're not in the cloud. They don't know what this is, but they want to build their BI reports. And this is sort of where it's super important that you minimize sort of the barriers to entry. So what we did was we had all the pipelines in place to set up Dremio for them. It took roughly 40 minutes. And then it's super straightforward for the consumers to start consuming. And once you sort of show that value, that's when we sort of went, hey, and Witboost is great, because there in the future, when consumers come in, they can find your data, read about it, you have data contracts in place. And this again isn't, a big hurdle to take. So this is sort of, being a bit dynamic on, based on the domain's direct needs, because that's really one of the challenges as well, is, having proper producer side incentives, because it's very easy to, incentivize consumers into the paradigm, because they, get, oh, it's describable, things are in one place, data products, data quality is hopefully better, and so on and so forth. And yet you can see that, they're compliant with the policies, but for the producers end, it isn't as clear. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would say that's one thing I always love to highlight, and Paolo, you might even want to jump on this one too, is like when I run data analytics platforms and a team that frankly isn't prioritized is coming to ask me for data, I'm like, well, I'll see you in 9 months, maybe. Right. So you just said 40 minutes. Like, I just want to underscore that like pretty heavily. And not only that, like showing them also how to do that themselves too in an easier way. So I guess from your side, like, does that normally bring an aha moment, or is that like the first step in your marketing campaign with those business users? Like, what is that part of that journey? I think that's what people struggle. Yeah.
Exactly. So it does bring the aha sort of moment, especially when they see sort of the advantages of, Dremio, not only in terms of unified access layer, but you've got some pretty good sort of ways in setting privileges on the users. You have good audit and so on, and also lineage, which is something that has been brought up a million times at Scania. So yeah, it's both the aha and then sort of them understanding what the bigger picture is.
And you touched a very important point: to gain adoption in a data mesh environment where different departments need to take ownership in producing data in a certain way. So it's super important to provide value through the platform so that they are incentivized to jump into the platform. There is no way, I never seen it working with just top-down enforcement. You need to use this platform because it's like that, because it's an architectural decision. So the platform itself need to provide some value, and typically the value is productivity and easiness to achieve results.
Exactly. Yeah, and we have sort of discussed this internally within our team as well regarding bringing value, because the full setup with Witboost, Dremio, and sort of achieving what we perceive as the ideal state of data mesh, that brings massive value to Scania. But sort of in local terms for the domains that might have some limited resources and so on and so forth, that isn't as clear. So if we try to segment things and say, hey, so this is what will bring direct value to you, and then try to make it as easy as possible for them to get into the full pattern, then that is a good way to go. Yes, but perhaps we can, if we move on a bit on the slides. So yeah, proactive marketing on various levels, positioning data mesh, be transparent in sort of where you are as a platform team in your journey. That's something we learned fairly early on. With that, there's a tendency of, because we did get quite a bit of, how do you say it, wide responses, and a lot of people started talking about it, but that also led to differing perceptions of what data mesh is. Some saw it as just a marketplace with all the data. Others saw it as something that will solve everything, whether that is, data lineage and all that stuff. And in ways that was actually pretty good, because that got the domains to start to talk, and a lot of sort of implied marketing happened on grassroots level and in the sort of decision maker level as well. But that's also one thing that I wanted to highlight. And then we talked a bit about having patterns in place, and for us, have that before making, commitments early on, because it took quite a bit of time for us to set up, our handbook, and set up, the clear processes for a domain to be onboarded. So that's something I also want to highlight in this. And then minimize barriers to entry for these business domains. So what we did was to sort of do a stepwise onboarding based on, as we just discussed, immediate value add and the domain specific situation. But the third thing is to have a clear definition of done. So what we did was and we're currently doing this, by the way, but we're currently onboarding 3 sort of key domains into our setup that will act as sort of the champions or best practice domains, with hopefully more or less 100% compliant data products. However, in terms of clear definitions of done, I think it can be good to view things as, it's better to have a filled shelf with this 65% compliant data products that you manage to onboard with minimum friction, over having a scarce shelf of 100% compliant data products and the others see it as a massive barrier, so they don't really dare to hop on the journey. And this is again connected to some of the collaborations we have with the Cloud Lake, helping out the information owners in there, keeping things simple, while we have these sort of best practice domains in there as well, because these less compliant ones can always be improved on over time.
Yeah, I know we have the fireside chat coming, but I'm curious on this one. We often talk about the facts problem, right? And you're kind of alluding to this a little bit of, if you force the 100% facts into the domain, right, it's great, you can now trust what's in there. But the other side of it is you still don't have spectrum level visibility of your data across the enterprise and what's actually being used. How did you and the team kind of navigate where you don't want to make sure there's a whole lot of garbage in here and lowering down facts, while still managing to make sure that we know what's happening inside the business, we know what assets are being used, and that's a way where we can identify where we need facts. So where are you at in that journey? Like, how did you...
I would say that we're pretty early on in that journey. We productionized our setup less than a month ago, but the approach we are taking is to keep it to the essentials. So when we adopt and help onboard a less mature domain, that we make sure and help them in getting their tables into the iceberg format, making it available in Dremio, again going back to the Cloud Lake collaboration, and thereafter really helping them and co-creating the data product together with them so that it is at least describable in a good way. They have a basic data contract in there, and they adhere to the internal policies that we have at Scania. And if we can achieve, the having the unified access layer with a global output port, as we call it, and there's a person and maybe some engineer in there who can help maintain the product over time with a bit of our help, maybe, then we're happy. So that's really when I talk about sort of 65% compliant product. So that's really what I mean.
Also on this, computational policies are playing a huge role. So the possibility to start with a certain level of compliance and governance, and step by step, meanwhile the adoption is increasing also the level of governance and the level of control that the platform team can achieve. So, for example, in Witboost, having all the deployments and all the computational policies in one single place is really helping to gain an end-to-end perspective of what is happening across all the domains.
Absolutely. And it also becomes clear for the domains what it is that they don't satisfy. So it will still be that when they build and define their product in Witboost and attach the output port to Dremio and describe things, they'll see a list of basically like, oh, here's a policy that we didn't pass, so we won't be able to publish it in the production environment. And that's sort of where we are to help, smooth things out and make them compliant. Yes, and another thing I just wanted to highlight is, of course, to respect the platform choice of the domains and to minimize, perceived enforcement from the platform team side, because it is about domain ownership. And if they, have expertise in the environment they have decided on, then that should, absolutely be embraced and kept in that way. But having global patterns and setting, which we did to set Iceberg and Delta to an extent as the de facto way of sharing data for analytics outside of data mesh, just for analytics in general, that was a big step on the way in, helping to sort of balance some alignment with what we want to do, but also have the domains, continue to do the work they're doing. Yes, and this one, balancing adoption speed and compliance with data product principles. This is sort of what we discussed already when we talked about sort of 100% compliant data products versus 65% barriers to entry and so on. So I'll keep it as it is here. Important point. But one thing that is good is to highlight and market internally these success stories around what you're trying to do. So what we have done, for example, one of the domains that we started collaborating with early on had a presentation, had several presentations within Scania to highlight sort of their data mesh journey and so on, and it really helps sort of to keep the talk going and for the concept to be spread across the company. So I thought I'd now try to make things a bit more tangible so that we have a glance at sort of the flow and how sort of the platforms, if you will, are set up. So as sort of described, we're in a multi-cloud environment and we are onboarding domains with clear patterns and with a handbook and with onboarding sessions to take responsibility and ownership over their data and turn them into products. Make sure that the open formats are adopted. And thereafter, we have with the help of Witboost, a data product builder with a provided toolbox in which they can start defining and describing their data product. And in there, They'll test it against the policies that are in place, so the custom Scania-made policies, to see if they're compliant. And once they are, that is when the data product is published into the marketplace, and consumers can request access through role-based access control. There are data contracts in place, and there we have Dremio as the common or default sharing pattern in order to embrace data democratization, if I am to use a buzzword.
So I'd be remiss, but I also want to take a shot at myself for asking this question. In the speed that we're seeing movement, whether it's RAG, LLM, Gen AI, and so forth. I'm trying not to say AIML because I may argue that's not AIML. How is this, like, how are you thinking about this architecture continuing to enable the speed and keeping up with those other capabilities? How are you marketing that, as you're obviously getting pressure to consider these other patterns? So I'm just curious, like, what does that storytelling look like for you and the team as these other things are coming in?
Yeah. So actually fairly early on in our journey, before we had, set all the things in place, we talked a lot about data mesh, democratizing data, and by having clear ownership, the data product owners would, start treating data as a product, based and tailored to, their consumers. Meaning that if you have machine learning engineers that are training, building machine learning models, that would probably be, raw data that is untouched. But the key here is that everything would exist in one sort of catalog where things are clearly described. So when you have someone like a data scientist or a machine learning engineer with a set use case, they can easily grasp what the product is about and the cases it can be used for. And by doing that, in the long term, we help to, reduce any sort of inefficiencies in how data is accessed and worked with, and in turn, then help, scale, and make, Scania sort of, if you want to use AI or machine learning, like that sort of space, more efficient.
There is also a question from Edward. So how did you implement policies and enforce them? For example, retention time of 12 months.
Yeah, so the policies, if I recall correctly, they're written in Python and Qlang, and they integrate with the tools that we have. So if I am a producer, and I'm sort of I've defined and built my data product, I've described it. So as you can see on the right-hand side, what happens there is that Witboost goes in to the internal tool, and basically checks if certain aspects are satisfied, and thereafter returns, this is okay. You can publish it, basically. So that is the gist of it.
Yes, and we have deploy time policies and runtime policies. So, for example, the retention time is something that is going to be checked at runtime. You have in this slide, you see. So it's two-phase compliance check at deploy time to avoid people going in production with something that is not standardized and compliant, and at runtime to verify that every promise made by the data producer is still maintained.
Exactly. So we have our runtime policy scheduled for once a week, meaning that if things are inconsistent with, for example, the data contract, maybe it is freshness of data, it can go in and see when the data was refreshed last time in Dremio, and then push that into Witboost, and compare that against what the producers have promised. Yes, so now I think we're on to the final slide, and I believe we have discussed a bit of this already, such as, stakeholder management, how you sort of incentivize change to happen, the scopes, managing the expectations early. Yes, I think, maybe sort of the point of being mindful around, initiatives that might have overlapping goals. I think the approach we took there, at least, I sort of mentioned that as well, but that is to collaborate over competing. But yeah, do we have any thoughts from Paolo or Nick's side?
Yeah, I have one go back. Because back to the facts question, I think you mentioned early on the auto registration tied, right? So if I'm in Snowflake and I'm creating an asset in Snowflake, one thing I used to pitch it in when I did my own road shows was compliance as code, right? So if you create these environments or you're creating these assets, making it very easy for you as a user to be able to obviously, even as an enterprise, know that these have been created, but then you as a producer, right, to be able to quickly put those into a space for others to be able to access, utilize, feedback, so forth. I guess that's maybe the second part of the previous question, which is how you're balancing that and whether you're looking at that from a governance lens or if you're looking for that for an ease of productionalization, and where you're at in that journey.
So you mentioned compliance as code. Are you thinking more on the governance side, or?
So maybe I'll give you an example from my own team. So I'll just say at one enterprise I previously worked at, right? You could go into a Snowflake environment, for example, provision your own environment, right? Run your own jobs, and then export that, right? Or use that data however you'd like to, shut it down. And unfortunately, at that company I was at the time, major company, Fortune 100, we had no visibility to that at the enterprise. We didn't really know what was even happening in there. There's other platforms, and granted, we worked with Snowflake to help fix that, while also on our side implementing what we called compliance as code. So whether you spun up an S3 bucket, you spun up a Snowflake environment, or otherwise, we auto-registered it into catalog, right? Or we minimally had visibility to people creating these assets. The second part of that is what I heard you, which is, all right, as you've created these, now we can help easily register these without having to do that in a manual way. How much automation are you bringing back even to that first part where, I experienced some of my pain early on, because I know there's still platforms out there, I'm trying not to throw shade, that still have that problem, right? Especially when you're in a highly distributed architecture.
Yeah, I think I got your question. I'll try to answer to the best of my abilities. So anyway, in terms of sort of governance as code, we segmented things into two parts. You have global policies that interact on the data product level. So this is exactly what I described earlier with having, integration with our internal tools. And then we have the local policies, which the domains themselves define. But that is, regular row, column, level access policies, masking policies. But from what you described, that's actually not something really that we have thought about, I believe.
Okay, cool. And then there actually is a question in here, one about Dremio. I know you mentioned you're early on in your journey, but if maybe I can even add to it. I think part of this is like, what are some of the metrics that you're using today? And then more specifically, I think the heart of the question is, how are you driving improvements and looking at those metrics, right? Capturing those wins to really help drive continuous adoption and growth and maturity. So as you're in these early days, what are you tracking, right? And then how are you making sure that you're growing appropriately, but also, I think just go back to like your definition of done, right? Being able to move and mature the pattern, like any startup, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the main thing that we're tracking right now is domain adoption. Before, it was also sort of the speed in which we managed to introduce new features into the platform as well. So, but now that we've productionized things, it's completely focused on domain adoption and the rate which we do that. So the current setup right now is that we help adopt 3 or 4 domains per month, setting aside roughly 3 hours per domain to get sort of the full flow with Dremio and Witboost and the data product creation. So for us, it's completely focused on adoption rate at the moment, I would say.
Yeah.
And then also,
I was gonna say, I have one more quick follow-up there, because I know a couple of our even prospects today which for, I'll say, a couple quarters, they've been trying to justify bringing Dremio in, for example, and Witboost and another one of the examples with us. Where they're kind of stuck on is helping justify the business case, right? And I'm curious, what did that process look like early on for Scania to be able to go, this is where we want to go.
Yeah.
But also, here's the impact of it, right? We're all stuck in this macroeconomic environment where you have to consider switching costs and so forth. So how did you present that, and how did you build a business case to justify changing these patterns, right? And investing in a team?
Yeah, there are a couple things. So we did some. I know Paul, our lead architect, did some really good investigations together with our lead data engineer into the costs, and then of course the potential of having a query federation layer, a unified access layer. And what we projected towards the business was basically, what would the alternative be if we didn't have something like this? Because we have Snowflake, we have domains on Azure, we have domains in AWS, we have a Cloud Lake in AWS, and then we have the other guys on SAP. And basically, what would the alternative be if we have the ambition to, make analytics more, available towards the end consumers? And how would it look like for someone in Scania, Brazil, for example, if they'd like to create some BI reports on data that is scattered around multiple platforms? Where would they find it? How would they just, find the documentation around it? How would they understand who owns it? And then finally, how would they access and actually start work with the data? And that's sort of the main points that we saw in adopting the Dremio plus Witboost setup. And then there were some bonuses in there as well, being that if you basically adopt Dremio with having your data in AWS, the costs are look very, very good compared to other alternative approaches. So I would say that is essentially how we approach that.
Did you have to put metrics against that, or was it more of the storytelling and you were able to drive adoption?
I would say was 80% storytelling.
Awesome. I always tell people that you can't discount the storytelling, right? You always have the numbers behind you, but it's driving the change, right? And people are harder to change than technology.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paolo. I know you have a question.
Yeah, and before you talk about being open and vendor agnostic, open standards, what was the reasoning behind this choice? You talked about Iceberg, and we all have seen what is happening around Iceberg. So
definitely,
that
was arguably one of the key and most impactful decisions we took to standardize on open formats. We did see the trend go that way, and we've now been reminded that was a pretty good, investment to do, given, Snowflake with the Polaris catalog and all the partnerships and so on that's going on. And in the end of the day, I think the main driver was that we couldn't. The thing is that we valued separation between storage and compute. We didn't want the producers to have scaled cost with the number of consumers that they have. This is by default available in, for example, Snowflake if you're using their native tables. But if we were to introduce a unified access layer, such as Dremio, we need to adopt on open formats in order to have that to continue to be the case. So by doing that, there isn't super much effort that needs to be done on the domain side, while we can achieve separation between storage and compute at the same time.
I'm curious. There's a lot of cool lessons learned here. Maybe if I flip it on the other side, what were the hard lessons learned? Like, what would you do differently, even though you're in early days?
Yes, I would say that the hardest lessons learned, or the biggest sort of challenge that we stumbled across, I alluded to it a bit, but it's a bit difficult to describe. But essentially, when we started marketing data mesh roughly a bit over a year ago within Scania, a lot of expectations started to happen, and in conjunction we were collaborating with the key domains I talked about earlier. However, when we did workshops with them and introduced these sort of early versions of our implementation, things weren't exactly as they expected, meaning that some of them lost interest and dropped off. And we even had some instances where they basically called all of this a development project that will, sort of fizzle away over time. So that was a big sort of lessons learned from our side, that be sure to have the patterns in place and sort of walk the talk, and manage expectations. It's good that the domains, even though they might have differing sort of impressions of what data mesh is on a positive side and so on, it's important that you're transparent with, how things, are going and when they can expect to be onboarded, or, to be able to be a part of the mesh, so to speak.
So I have a friend right now I was talking to last week, who they have we'll just say a massively legacy, home built, small startup, hasn't really made too many updates to it, platform that clearly wasn't working for them. They got pushed to look at we'll just say an alternative platform that won't really fit future state for them, but they've kind of been through the POC. And one of the coolest problems to have is the business is ready to go. Right. So what they're trying to do is justify effectively slowing down for a month or two, right? Proving out, we'll just say, a better pattern with a Dremio, right? How would you advise them where they have the easiest problem of getting business adoption, right? Or I would say that they solved the hard problem by doing that, but being able to go, well, if we slow down a little bit, right, we can go much faster and farther intentionally.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, your perspective there.
I would say, I mean, we've been into a similar situation like this as well. I would say that what we did was to keep things very honest and have our sort of, like Paul, who's our lead architect, describe sort of what it is the situation is right now and why we need to have a bit more time. And what happened was that we did get quite a bit of sympathy for it, and they understood it's better that we do things the right way, that will help us in the long term, than that we go with something that could potentially, be a bit burdensome further down the line, but good in the short term, so to speak.
Yeah, my fast feedback to him was the storytelling matters, right? And just talk about what's possible. Right. So you can get to where your problems are today, but how do you unlock the possibility of tomorrow and actually even bringing that to them? Right. And that's back to even the AI ML side, right? Is the engine that you're going to need later is different than the engine you need now.
Yes. And what we do is to exemplify a lot of that with basically telling a story. Okay, but imagine a BI consumer in, market A that is just, looking for this data product, in this case with data mesh, X, Y, and Z, unified access layer, like that sort of stuff, but keeping it simple and also simplifying things based on, who you're talking to. Yeah.
Cool. I know I've been dominating. Paolo, do you have some over there? Sorry, and if there's any other questions too, feel free to use the chat box, everybody.
You talked about change management and stakeholder management. So now that you are entering in a new phase, so after managing expectation, after delivering the platform, after enabling the onboarding domain, now how is changing the relationship between the IT and the business and all the other stakeholders involved in a data mesh?
Yes. So I would say, it's a great question. So I would say, like, as mentioned in the beginning, it was a lot about balancing the expectations, not over-promising, and also sort of going through the roller coaster of them being disappointed, but also further down the line happy, and so on and so forth. So now it's pretty much, proactively reaching out to these different domains that we've worked with and built relationships with historically. And now that we have these set patterns in place, they're pretty happy with what they see. And the response is pretty positive. So I would say, like, right now, the focus is to continue to do that while iteratively improving on the platform. But yeah, that's sort of how the ways of working are right now.
And how do you set the roadmap of this platform? Are you creating some kind of product thinking for the platform itself?
Yeah. So in the roadmap, we have sort of shifted the focus from, features to be implemented into having separate lanes for domain adoption, joined by certain things that we'll add on over time. And since some of these domains work in increments, as it's called, so every sort of 10 weeks, they have a lot of heavy planning, and then they have a set of goals that they need to achieve. We're sort of adapting to that as well, so that we can help plan the onboarding and have that roadmap with these different domains to be onboarded.
Now, as part of the domains, did you prioritize, how did you do prioritization even within the domains? Because my experience is classic goes one of two ways, and you want to always kind of jump on the other side, which is I usually tell people, you don't know where to start in finance, right? There's a very clear people who own that, right? There's got to be facts in there and bringing that maturity. And oh, by the way, everyone knows that one or two people's name that basically owns and runs all the underlying data for that domain. And then you can deal with the bounded context and continue to mature out in other domains. The other is getting early on at leadership, right? And then clearly being able to track some of these business deliveries where you have that storytelling of from to. Right, back to before of, hey, normally it would take you 6 to 9 months to set these domains up, or right by waiting for central team. So if we go after this initiative, we can deliver it 9 months faster with this new pattern, right? And here's the impact to business. So usually you start in one and start popping over the other to drive more expansion and alignments, right? So I'm curious, from the early days to now, where are you at in that journey, and advice that you'd share with others?
Yeah, so in terms of sort of how we selected the domains, we sort of set it up as you have a couple of primary domains. So you've got sales and marketing, you have finance, you have connected vehicles, for example, and we try to contact some of the more sort of impactful domains with subdomains within that area, and work with. So these were actually the set of domains that we worked with early on, and thereafter start helping them in understanding what data mesh is, so that the word could go out, and then working with introducing them to what we have now. So I would say in the sort of selection choice, it was very much around impact, number of consumers, good use cases that could exemplify a lot of what we want to achieve, and so on.
So if I heard that right, is there was the functional domains, right, which sometimes can be organizational or functional, but then there's the micro domains underneath of that, such as a connected vehicle that can cut across, right, with bounded context into multiple other domains. So I guess back to domain flexibility and even domain architecture. How did that process look like for you? And are you still in it, right?
Yeah, we try to keep things in terms of how the domain map would look like and the subdomains within it. We try to keep things fairly straightforward and understandable, because it's easy to sort of get tunnel vision on the theory. But what we did was that on a Traton level, so basically the sort of holding company with Scania and MAN and Navistar and so on, they set sort of a global domain map that should be common between the brands. And we made use of that to sort of define the primary business domains. And then when we talk to different groups within R&D or within sales and marketing, we position them within that sort of as a subdomain within that box, if you will.
Cool.
Yeah, maybe another question, an internal one. So how the budget is working in this data mesh initiative? IT funding the data products implementation, or is it more on the business side? So without entering too much in detail, so how the budget is working there?
I was about to say you'd have to ask my manager.
I was
But
gonna say, how's the budget approval?
that's his. He's the one to answer that. But essentially, what we did was that IT was to fund the first year, and thereafter, over time, we'd put over some of the costs and so on the domains in terms of Dremio Witboost. And then, of course,
Wow, you
consumers.
went pretty well there. My history is always like you have to fund 2 years to really drive full adoption.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
pretty good.
So the strategy is to have centralized funding to reach the flywheel effect of the platform, and then letting business going.
Exactly. Right? The carrot and the stick, so to speak. Yeah.
Cool. I know we only have a couple more minutes. Maybe August, we've asked a whole lot of questions. I do want to make sure you have some space too. Are there any things in terms of what we're seeing, trends or otherwise, that we can kind of help you on in our journey? Obviously, you have access to us anytime, but something you'd want to highlight or dive into with us?
I don't know. One thing I was curious about, Nick, because you mentioned you'd helped other companies in adopting sort of the data mesh paradigm, and based on that, what would you say were the key differences between what you've done with them versus sort of our approach, and if there's any sort of learnings us at Scania could take from the work you've done?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I was trying to pull out a little bit earlier, and is really that business case development. And I have a fun story I've told a bunch of times where I won't get into the full story. We don't have time, but the TLDR of it is like business users just looked at me and said, I don't care, right? Whether you're centralizing, you're decentralizing, right? Whether it's mesh, whether it's waterfall, agile, like you can just use all these words all day long, right? I need to grow my business, right? So how are you going to help me do that? And I think that's always a massively hard problem that I think us geeks get pulled into. Where I always try to advise folks is like the technology, the data, right? All that stuff is tertiary. I even had a leader once tell me like I see the data, right? I get it, it's probably a bad idea, but I don't like how the data makes me feel. So we're gonna go do this, right? So I learned to like even almost stop showing the data, right? So it's bringing them along that journey. But the second part of that is then with that partnership, building that business case, right? And where I've told I was working with one team in the UK a few months ago, where they're all in on the platform and they clearly see the impact, right? And they're like, I just can't get the business to come with me. And I'm like, because you're talking in your language. I was like, I can guarantee you in the business that you're in, you probably had some material breach or otherwise, because I've read about it. Right? And imagine if you had these patterns in place before, right? What would the impact be to your response, right? That acquisition that was just made with another one of our prospects. How does this pattern help you immediately day one say, what's our total sales across both companies? What's the performance of our product across both companies? So you've got to speak in a way that allows them to massively lower that barrier. And in a most ideal world, have metrics tied to it, but that's the language you have to speak. And I think that's the only one. It's like, it's really cool that you had that alignment, from the top, so you could really go down and drive and start building. But I'd say that's my biggest lesson learned is always start business back.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I don't know, Paolo, your experience, obviously you've been with a bunch of customers now too, especially building a startup, right? And trying to justify trying these new technologies and patterns.
No, I totally agree. Then I followed the Scania strategy and adoption since long time, so I'm pretty aligned with the August journey. We have another question. I don't know if we have time from Gregor regarding probably to the budget question. So, are you planning to charge data product consumers, or data product will have their own pricing in the future? Are you planning for that, or?
Yeah. So we're adding on the ability for domains to add a bit of a markup on the consumption if they want to. So that's one thing. And then us ourselves, there will be certain costs tied to sort of using the services, but it's sort of done in a way that doesn't make it too costly, if you will.
So a nice
but that's the essence, yeah. What was that?
I said a nice chargeback model, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think this was the funky one, is like being able to not, to your point, like not charge back on the things that are materially going to move the needle for the business, right? And I think that's the hard part, and I think that's the smart thing you guys are doing is with that 1 year. I'd probably guess you might move to 2 at some point, but I hope you get 1. But being able to go like that, your consumers will tell you the value of the platform,
exactly,
right? And then usage and so forth. And I think that's the part where you're using that data to then continue to mature in your journey and find those pivot points to say, hey, I think we might need more data, or I think we might want to drive some adoption in these areas. And to the point is, some areas you might not charge back on to drive more maturity around the business and impact.
Yeah.
Also, according to FinOps principle, a good intermediate step would be the showback approach. So showing back the cost, educating people that data anyway is is costing to someone, because right now is a cost that is completely hidden in the IT. So educating people, doing showback, and then moving towards a chargeback model.
Well, especially if you show them what it would have cost, right? Like, don't go back to the old pattern, because we actually saved you, right, 80%, right? So
exactly. Yeah. We have gotten a bit of, say, revenge lobbying from other domains that have adopted certain platforms that, thinking of the potential savings you can do with adopting Dremio as a producer and so on. Like when we've done the comparisons between alternatives, it's I'll keep it at that. But there has been
hey guys,
lobbying.
I just wanted to jump in and say, this has been a fantastic conversation. We're kind of getting near the end of the time, but I just want to give you guys a huge thank you for having this conversation this week on Gnarly Data Waves. And for everyone who's listening, you can rewatch this episode on Spotify, on YouTube, as it'll get posted in the next 24 to 48 hours. I encourage you all to add August, Paolo, and Nick on LinkedIn so you can follow the things they're doing, ask them any further questions, get and see even more of the exciting things that come. But again, just one more thank you to Nick, August, and Paolo for being here today. And this is going to wrap up the episode. So make sure you voted in the poll that popped up. And again, thank you guys so much for being here this week on Gnarly Data Waves. And again, stay tuned. There'll be more episodes of Gnarly Data Waves covering all sorts of great data lakehouse topics, bringing them directly to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.